Today I'm painting tree trunks and branches. Hi everyone, Steve Elliott here again. I'm working in Artrage on the iPad today. It's turned out that I've produced a series of paintings, like a little mini series of the way the trees and the landscape has changed from summer through to autumn, and now we're moving towards winter. So I thought I'd continue that theme, and this is I've done lots of paintings with bright oranges and things, but the colours are getting a bit more subdued now. I showed that in another painting I did, but this one I want to particularly concentrate on the fact that there are now no leaves on the trees, or a lot of the trees, the leaves are disappearing, and that's exposing all of the branches. And what I want to do is produce this painting and get in lots of those branches and things. I've done one with a watercolour where I was sort of showing you how you could sort of put a wash on to get twigs, but with oil painting, it's subtly different. You can sort of use greyed off colours, I guess, but I'm going to just sort of paint in the main branches. So I begin, as always, when I'm using the iPad, I use the roller brush to get an initial colour over the whole of the painting, and I kind of vary it slightly depending whereabouts I am on the canvas to try and get some of that local colour in. And it's usually a sort of a pastel colour I use, off-white really, and that just sort of helps me judge the tones that I'm going to put in the painting as I progress. And as I'm sort of developing this style, I'm working in one layer. I find that is by far the best way to do it. If you want a realistic oil paint, if you just use the one layer, you can smear those paints together. As you can see on that fence there, when I brush that in, it sort of mixed the other colour underlying into it. So that's great. And I use the square oil brush to start with, and that seems to be my go-to brush to get on the sort of first level of detail, if you like. And I'm leaving that tree right till last. I thought, I'm just going to paint in the scene as though that tree isn't there. And I could have painted it on a separate layer, but I didn't. I actually stayed on one layer for the whole of the painting, as I said earlier. So I'm just sort of putting on broad strokes and selecting colours. I pick them off I find with the iPad, I like this colour mixer, and I begin by I tend not to use the palettes. I choose a few colours, get those in. You notice if you look at the greens, I've got bluer greens in the background to sort of throw that into the distance, and then as I come forward, I just slide round from the blue greens into the yellow greens, and it's a great way to sort of keep the same what's the word I'm looking for? The same saturation of colour and same level of light and dark in it, but just change the hue slightly, and you can sort of really make colours look as though they're in the foreground. And I've obviously strengthened the colours up as well in the foreground, but it sort of really gives that kind of impression that there is distance in that painting. And now I'm going into painting this tree, and I'm using a sort of a light brown to start off, and I do paint it pretty much in silhouette with one colour. And the way I get those twigs in, if you like, or branches, I use the brush. It's all set at 100% size all the way through, and I just do very light flicks, just sort of flicking the brush off and barely touching the canvas, and you get those thin lines, and it scrapes through the paint. And then what I did, I just moved the slider up into a darker band of colour, maybe moved it slightly more into a warmer colour, and started putting those darker colours in on that tree. And I'm just sort of adding branches and by putting the darker ones in, it gives a sort of a depth and 3-dimension to the tree. So I'm just sort of keeping those branches nice and thin. What is important though is that your main trunk is thick enough. Don't be scared to give yourself a thick trunk that will actually support. And you see, I've just thickened that up. I overdid it a bit actually, and then went back into it a bit. You do need branches that will support the other branches that are connected to it. So don't be scared to make them of a reasonable thickness. And then I start picking out a little bit of detail. I'm putting some highlights in. There we go. Sort of an highlight on the top of that branch on that one. And you can paint shadows of where branches overlap and create a shadow. Just sort of adding form. And I also brought if you noticed, the bush that's in front of the tree, I kind of painted that up into it so it looks like that tree is coming out of those bushes and twigs and things. And then I start adding a little bit more detail into the foreground and into those twigs. I've now swapped brushes. I'm using the thick oil paint round brush now. Still at 100%. I don't change the size of it. Just to add a few sort of brown dying leaves on that bush and twigs and things that are in the foreground. You can see still very muted soft colours though. And I'm just going to sign that now. There we go. And it's done. That is it. That is my winter tree, a naked tree. I hope you've liked this video. If you have, a big thumbs up as always is much appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, because I have lots of videos like this and I would love to be sharing them with you. So hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.